Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone tonight to a regular meeting of Council. It's actually the first televised meeting as we get back from the summer break. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 1, I'd like to invite Mr. Rick Lepore to come forward. The City is presenting on behalf of the Office of the Governor General, the Governor General's Certificate of Commendation. And I'd like to invite the Mayor to offer some remarks in this regard.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lepore, for coming out tonight. This is a very unique occasion in that we're representing as a council, as Mayor, the Governor General of Canada. And it's my honor on behalf of Coquitlam City Council and the Governor General of Canada to formally recognize Mr. Rick Lepore for his selfless act of bravery for aiding in the rescue of Gordon Kingston from the Similkameen River in Manning Park on May 2007. Mr. Lepore aided other rescuers during the incident by monitoring the victim from the riverbank while equipment was assembled to retrieve Mr. Kingston from the freezing river. He also assisted in pulling the victim out of the water once he was reached and tied to a fire hose by another rescuer. Mr. Lepore checked the victim for broken bones and dressed his cuts. The victim, of course, was suffering from extreme hypothermia and as such required quick intervention to preserve his body heat and save his life. On behalf of the Right Honourable David Johnston, Governor General of Canada, Coquitlam City Council, and the City of Coquitlam, I'd like to formally recognize and congratulate Mr. Rick Lepore for an act of great merit in providing assistance to others in a selfless manner and helping save the life of Gordon Kingston. The Governor General of Canada, under such circumstances, asks local government to step in and represent the Crown, and as such, it is this office's honor, on behalf of His Excellency, to invite Mr. Lepore up to receive his commendation and be recognized by all those in attendance today. I had an honor to speak with Mr. Lepore just prior to the meeting, and I think he doesn't want the fuss that's being created here, and I appreciate that. He's a little bit reticent about it, but this is for us, not for you, and so we get to acknowledge you. So thank you. From now on, you're known to please. No. For an act of great merit in providing assistance to others in a selfless manner at Similkameen River in Manning Park, British Columbia, on May 23rd, 2007, Rick Lepore receives a commendation awarded by Governor General of Canada, Reid Hall. Thank you very much. We all would join the stand. Okay. Have a nice evening. Now, I told Mr. Lepore and his family that part of the honor is he gets to stay for the rest of the meeting. He quickly turned down the honor. So thank you very much. It's great to have Coquitlam residents recognized like that across the country. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, which is the Staff Leadership Development Team. I'd like to invite Ms. Heather Barr to come forward, and she's going to speak on our Leadership Speaker Series, provide an update, and also an appreciation to sponsors.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Heather Barr. I'm a City employee and representing Coquitlam Staff Leadership Development Team. I'm here to provide you with an update on the Leadership Speaker Series and to take this opportunity to publicly thank our generous sponsors. As you may know, the Leadership Development Team is a grassroots group of staff who took BCIT leadership classes provided by the City. We were inspired and we wanted to retain what we had learned, so we formed a leadership interest group. From there, we opened up the group to all staff with the focus of putting on a high-profile, revenue-neutral leadership speaker series. This project has many benefits. The benefits to employees is providing opportunities to make positive impacts, gaining experience and competencies that otherwise would not be available to us, being creative and thinking outside the box. And throughout this project, we've encouraged each other to think extraordinary. The benefit to the city is building of our organizational capacity, creating opportunities to follow the city values to inform, involve, and inspire, providing opportunities to connect with our various communities. The benefit to the community is bringing renowned speakers to Coquitlam to inform and inspire the community and at an economical price. And by reaching out to our youth, the development of our future speakers. We recently invited 2 representatives from the Coquitlam Youth Council to join our project, Mr. Arturo Bastias and Ms. Gloria Hahn. Ms. Gloria Hahn is with us here this evening, Your Worship. They are learning from us, and we are certainly learning from them. We've brought 7 renowned speakers to Coquitlam to date. These speakers and their topics include Mr. Peter Legg, Personal Change, Mike Harcourt, Environmental Sustainability, Cassie Campbell, Leadership and Teamwork, Margaret Trudeau, Mental Health and Bipolar Disorder, Simon Jackson, Power of One, Rafi Kavukian, Child Honoring, and on November the 22nd, Trevor Linden, whose topic is Leadership. The Simon Jackson event inspired us to create a Power of One contest, which was open to middle school students in the Tri-Cities who were involved in a project or initiative that gave back to their community. We collaborated with School District 43 on the project, and the prize was donated by Coquitlam Centre. We are currently planning for 2012, and I'm very happy to announce our speaker for next year. Mr. John Furlong, CEO of Vancouver 2010 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games. This event will be held on March the 27th at the Evergreen Cultural Centre, and Mr. Furlong's keynote will be Living Leadership based on Van Ock's 5 core values of trust, team, excellence, sustainability, and creativity. The Coquitlam Leadership Team would like to thank Council and Coquitlam's Management and Human Resources Department for their support over the past 3 years. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the support and generosity of our 2 long-term sponsors, Task Construction Management and Smith Wright Disposal. Task Construction Management has managed the design and construction of many community facilities throughout Coquitlam. They have been providing leadership and direction on behalf of many public and private sector building owners and clients. And Smith Wright is a Coquitlam-based company dedicated to working within the community to provide the highest level of service while supporting ecological, social, and economic sustainability. When we first started planning the Leadership Speaker Series back in 2008, the economy was robust, and then it quickly fell. While companies we approached for support at that time said no, these 2 companies demonstrated their leadership and their corporate values by stepping up and saying yes. On behalf of the Staff Leadership Development Team, we would like to thank our 2 sponsors and present them with a token of our appreciation. Representing Task Construction Management is Mr. John Hebert, President and GM, as well as Mr. John Bowser, COO. Representing Smith Wright Disposal is their President, Mr. Gordon Smith. And at this time, Your Worship, if we can call you forward to make this presentation. Thank you.
Appreciation for the kind of support that you've given this leadership team. The leadership team has done some great work in our community now. And thank you very much.
Her and I used to get into hard times. I remember we used to make showing him. We talked you into giving us meat.
I didn't schedule all these things myself. Those two companies, though, have created, I think, have helped create an environment within our leadership team that has brought some outstanding speakers. Margaret Trudeau, for example, presenting on the stigma of mental illness, a very poignant presentation. And I look forward to the next presentation, which is Trevor Linden on leadership. Trevor Linden, a local businessman here in Coquitlam. So I look forward to those, and I thank those companies again on behalf of Coquitlam City Council. And Councillor Sikora wants.
Thank you very much. The one thing, Heather, we're going back about 30 years ago when it was you and May. Yeah, when you and May Reid, matter of fact, started the staff picnic in Blue Mountain Park, I believe. And I was the only chef then that cooked about 700 steaks, so didn't have the help that they have today with all the council members pitching in. So Heather, it was great because I know that between you and May, you did a lot of work and it was very, very successful. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it.
But it wasn't 30, we're only 29, so it...
Okay, 29 years ago, sorry.
There you go. Well, Heather and I go way back. Actually, we worked together back then in those days, and it's great to see you continuing to push the teamwork here at Coquitlam. Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 3 is our third presentation. I'd like to invite Ms. Jennifer Renny to come forward. Ms. Renny is the Senior Research Manager with Ipsos Reid, and she's here to present on the Ipsos Reid 2011 Citizen Survey results.
Thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Jennifer Renny. I'm a Senior Research Manager at Ipsos Reid Public Affairs. I'm here today to present the results of our 2011 Citizen Survey conducted in the spring of this year. The survey is an annual survey and has been conducted since 2003. As has been done in the past, the survey was conducted by telephone with a random sample of 400 Coquitlam residents. As I go through this presentation, please note on the left-hand side of each slide, where applicable, we have compared the results of this survey to other municipalities across the Lower Mainland. The key findings. The key findings of this survey is that all results are predominantly positive. This includes major indicators such as quality of life, overall level and quality of city services, including communications and contact, as well as overall value for tax dollars. Getting straight to the results of the survey, for quality of life, the large majority of Coquitlam residents at 99% rate the quality of life in the city as good or very good. If you take note of the very good marks compared to other municipalities in the Lower Mainland, Coquitlam outperforms. The same results were evident in 2010, and that just points to the positive momentum that's being trended. When asked specifically about the quality of life and the change in quality of life over the past 5 years, more residents say that the quality of life has improved than those who have said that they have worsened. We usually calculate a net score of improved to worsened, and currently you sit at a net of 18 points, which is even stronger improvement over last year. Last year when we presented the results, it was a positive story, and this year it's even more positive. When asked what the main reasons for the improved quality of life, the top answers are improved recreation facilities. In addition, there is mentions of more recreational facilities, but in addition to recreation, we see comments about improved infrastructure and improved transportation. Please note when looking at this slide that we only have 57 individuals who stated that quality of life has worsened. We have no clear consensus on the main reasons for the decline, And as you can see, even the top answer is only representative of 9 or 10 individuals. Issue agenda. The top issue on citizens' mind, again, is transportation. We do go into more detail about transportation in a couple of questions later on, but for the most part, transportation net includes transit, roads, construction, and some even mention parking. Looking at city services in particular, first we asked about the overall feel, the overall level of quality of services, and again we see nearly all citizens say that they are satisfied with the services. And again, these are at par with last year's positive results. But they are comparable to other municipalities in the Lower Mainland. We did test specifically on 9 service areas, and all receive highly satisfied scores from 8 to 9 and 10. There's only 2 services tested that received relatively, yet still positive marks, and that's road maintenance and neighborhood planning. About half of the residents that we surveyed had had some contact with the city in the past year, and of those, 76% rated their last experience with the city positively. Financial planning. 81% of those surveys say that they rate the value that they receive for their municipal tax dollars to be good. If given a choice between increased taxes, either to maintain or enhance current city services, or the alternative to cut service, either to maintain or reduce taxes, there's an even split between the choices. We've noticed a trend, not just with Coquitlam, but with other municipalities, that since the recession, there's been less of an appetite to increase taxes as there once was, and now we're seeing that there's now a trade-off, and residents are more seriously considering cuts in services than they once were before the recession. As I mentioned, we did ask a couple of transportation-specific questions. The top issue with respect to transportation is rapid transit. This surfaced with mentions of the SkyTrain, the Evergreen Line, a lack of transit, or just rapid transit in general. When we sum all of these in a net, the total is 37% who mention rapid transit as the top issue. We also asked about potential transportation improvements, and all were well received. Relatively speaking, scoring lower in important points are bicycle facilities, and this is also a slight decline over last year. And the last issue that was covered in the survey pertains to crime and personal safety. And the biggest crime and personal safety issue mentioned was simply break and entry and property crimes. Drugs and grow-ups follow closely, and then distantly theft and even gang-related issues. What I like to notice in this slide is the 17% and the 9% who did say nothing or don't know, and to me that points that there's no one pressing issue on the top of minds, which is also a positive and could be added to the list of positive results to the survey. That is what I have.
Well, I thank you very much, Jennifer. We have questions from a couple of councillors. So far, Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great report. However, I wish we would have had this report. It's 37 pages, and I was critical the other day about Metro Vancouver dropping something on the last minute on our table to the clerk. When would this come to the city. Could we have had it over the weekend at home? We could have read it.
Mr. Dumont?
Thank you very much, through your worship, to Councillor Sikora. This survey was completed in June. We did actually distribute this report to Council in July for information, saying that we would be bringing it forward in September. September is the normal time we do the presentation, but as a matter of course, we do give it to Council once it's completed, just for their information. So it went out in the mail a couple of months ago.
I realized that we got something in July, but I wanted to see the comparison from July till now, if there is any, you know. And up here again, you mentioned satisfied and some satisfied, and you bunch it together, shows like 96% that are look like they're very satisfied, which they're not. Okay, and also you ask a question, I guess. Do you want your taxes cut, or do you want your taxes increased to give you this level of service? And you say, well, if you don't want the policeman, you don't want the fireman, we'll have to increase your taxes if you want them. If you don't want them, we'll cut your taxes. So the people, of course, will say, well, we don't want the policeman cut or the fireman. We need that service, so they'll go for the tax increase. But that's not the only way that you can really give the policemen and the firefighters by a zero-based budget. And a lot of the people don't understand what a zero-based budget is. But many businesses, and I'm one of them, operate a zero-based budget. Very, very important. Now, in here, on page 8, it says poor leadership guidance. And that looks like a very high percent. And then taxes increased and taxes again. See, and those are the things that exactly the people are critical in this city. They're fed up. The bubble is burst as far as taxes are concerned. It says here on page 9, taxation municipal government spending 15%. See, they're dissatisfied the way the government handles your money. And I am too. I'm very, very dissatisfied the way we spend taxpayers' money. For instance, in other words, you know, looks like a recession is coming, but however, or might be a little recession coming, but however, the other day we found $3.5 million a surplus somewhere, so we spent it, which is a terrible way of going about it as far as the government is concerned. And it says taxation, municipal government spending is also a big amount of people on page 10. Okay, and I just glanced at this, and in here it says somewhat satisfied as far as city services, 62%. Got a couple other markings in here.
Were you have questions for? Were you wanting any answers to questions?
Yeah, and total poor service is 17%. And it's worse as it goes on. So the report is a good report. However, see, it says cutting services 48%. Would like to see services cut, and really because they've been misinformed, ma'am, as far as with these questions. The questions are being asked. It's like you're leading a question, and you get the answer that you want to give them if you ask the question the proper way. Am I correct? There's certain ways, if you want to get a certain answer, you load the question in such a way that they can only answer the one way.
We did provide 4 answer choices.
Pardon?
There are 4 answer choices, and we combine either cut services or increase taxes, and the results support what you're saying, where there's less of an appetite for increased taxes.
Yeah, and going a little further to this, Mayor, when you were a council member, you were very dissatisfied with these kind of reports. Matter of fact, it's on record that you were very unhappy where it says good, satisfied, and not satisfied. You also were critical about them bunching both of them together. No. And if you don't believe it, I can show you paper clips out of that. Okay. Very simple, and your comments. So now you seem to be, as a mayor, you seem to be buying it lock, stock, and barrel. And I think it's terrible. Thank you.
Are these the same questions that that you ask in other municipalities by and large?
Yes, across Canada.
Okay, and I just had one clarification. On page Councillor Zakora referred to the 17%. Now, I know that N is 57. How many people are that identify, how many individual respondents would have identified that particular concern as a concern?
9 or 10.
9 or 10 people. Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. And I'm not going to shoot the messenger. I understand that you're just reporting what the results were. I do have some questions about the way it was presented and maybe some questions on the results here. I'll start with the first one where you're talking about the change in quality of life, and I was wondering why you chose to highlight the fact that many citizens say the quality of life has improved when actually 52% say it stayed the same. Why was it important to put forward the change rather than the majority?
That's the biggest finding of that slide. Usually we calculate the net score and present the net findings, and a plus 18 is notably higher than what you've seen in other municipalities. The story in that slide is the great improvement. Combine that with stayed the same, but the reality is we've seen a lot of improvements with all attributes or most of what we measured in the survey, and it all points back to that.
I take some pleasure in the fact that there's been an improvement, but I take some concern in the fact that the majority have said, well, it's just stayed the same. Reasons why the quality of life has worsened, and of course no single reason stands up with the top 5, and I don't think it was a lot of surprise on the crime rate. Perhaps people are always concerned about that, traffic congestion. Well, we know what we're going through as we're trying to fight for the Evergreen line. Taxes and density, but also what was the question as reported here was city guidance and poor leadership. What was the question for that? How did you determine that? What was the actual question that was asked?
How we collect
I know it's in the appendix, but I just can't find it.
We asked specifically, what are the reasons why you say the quality of life has worsened? And we collect the verbatim responses and just code them and condense them to a quick snippet to put on the chart. If you want a full verbatim report, we can provide that.
Yeah, no, I just thought there was a specific question that I was looking for. I thought I saw it before.
I believe the question is printed at the bottom of that table. Question 5, Q5.
Well, I'm looking at page 8, and there's not a question printed there that I can see.
It's right at the bottom of page 8 there. Q5 is, why do you think the quality of life has worsened? N is 57, which would have been those respondents, I guess.
I thought there was a specific question on leadership or city guidance other than that one. I wasn't sure. No. Talking about balancing taxation and service cuts, I'm trying to remember now, is this one of the first years that the actual, I mean, it's a minor percentage, but it's cut services is greater than increased taxes? Is this the first year that we've had that, or has it normally been they'd rather see an increase in taxes?
There's been an increasing trend since 2008.
Do you remember what it was last year when you did the comparison?
I do have it in the presentation. Cut
That's
services
the norms,
is 44%. Increased taxes, again, last year was pretty much even year prior, and 2008 is when it started to shift.
Cut services, this is one of the first years that it's cut services is marginally increased over what increased taxes. Yeah, okay, not much, no. And of course, so we're talking about how many respondents, but this is a survey, and it's valid within plus or minus 4, and it's statistically valid across all the communities. So if you were to extrapolate those 9 or 10 responses, that would be into percentages much higher than that. You can't really go on how many respondents are. Those are representative of the total survey. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about methodology. So when you asked the question, did you provide a range of choices for answer, or did people express their own?
It depends on the question.
Okay, let's take the quality of life question, question 4, which starts with improved recreation facilities, improved expanded infrastructure, improved transportation and roads.
Here?
That's one.
This is an open-ended question.
Okay,
Everything listed is top of mind. We do allow for multiple responses. If you sum the total, it equals more than 100%. So an individual can mention a couple of reasons why they perceive the quality of life to have improved. There's no probing other than for clarification purposes.
Okay, so that answers what was going to be my question, which was, so how do you differentiate between transportation, roads, and expanded infrastructure? And it's in the mind of the person who answered the question.
Exactly.
And we could effectively, I think, perhaps combine those in looking at, although people may have said two things.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
sometimes we do provide a net score, which balances out. If it's one individual, we only count them once.
Thank you very much.
There you go. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I have a question from on page 11 of the report. Talks about taxation, municipal government spending, and there's a comment that says that it's more likely to be mentioned by those who have lived in Coquitlam for more than 20 years, 23% compared to 14% who've lived in the area for 10 years or less, and 6% of those who have lived in the area for 11 to 20 years, which I find is very curious. And I wanted to know if that's standard across all municipalities or is that unique to Coquitlam?
We do often see differences across different municipalities. I would have to look into the data, but it is a trend with the longer that they've lived here, the more engaged they are.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, I had similar questions about the crosstab. To what extent is that mining of data available about length of time in community, number of children, age of household, those sorts of things?
We ask a series of demographic questions to classify the answers. We've been conducting this study since 2003, and based on feedback that we've received every year, we keep adding and adding to the types of questions that we ask so that we can break up the data, and then we do weight it according to recent census data.
So
we do have approximately 20 breakouts of the data, not just the total, but we do compare household composition, own rent home, age, gender, neighborhood as the top ones that we can provide. If you're interested, we have the detailed tables available.
So, for example, our staff have been working very hard on customer service improvements. If we were to see marked improvements in an area, we could dig in and find out to what extent those were, say, services to seniors or services to families, or...
There is the potential to run multiple crosstabs if someone's interested. How we have the data presented already is one column per category, but there is the potential to run the data otherwise if someone is interested.
Okay.
So we do have the information. We can run the crosstabs potentially, provided we ask the question during the survey.
Okay, and this is the same methodology that was done last year, the year before, the year before?
Yes.
Same questions by and large?
For the most part, yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much. Very good report. I'm liking how we can trend everything across the questions and get that range, and the plus 18 is quite an interesting score, the quality of life. The one question we come about taxation, I just, do you find maybe the responses on taxation would have been also because of top of mind of the HST vote? Would that have, you think, had any response in how that question responded? Being more top of mind through this last year than might not normally have been? Do you see any correlation in that?
Not necessarily. Generally with municipal studies, that when referencing taxes, it's more pertaining to property taxes and the like. When we conducted the survey, it was prior to the announcement that the HST would no longer be. So I don't suppose that a lot of the taxation questions were impacted by the timing of their fielding around that.
Okay. I'd like to also point out that I think just to the Public Works, that 98% satisfies an excellent score and a job well done by the Public Works. Mr. Suzak.
Bill wants to add something. Accept that.
No, thank you for the courtesy, Your Worship. I will pass that compliment on to the literally to the men and women who are in the trenches doing that work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing no other speakers, I want to add on behalf of Council our thanks to all of the staff, because these are, in many places, customer service initiatives. This is the contact between the community and the city employees, and those contacts can have a tremendous effect on people's perceptions of the community, and I want you to please pass on to all of our staff our appreciation for the ongoing improvements we've seen in the way in which the public is satisfied with our community. This is absolutely a great report. I thank you very much, Jennifer, for coming to present to us, and look forward to next year.
Next item, item 4, is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Tuesday, September 6th. The recommendation is to approve these minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is the minutes of the public hearing held Monday, September 12th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, September 12th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor McNell, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is a delegation. I'd like to invite Ms. Elaine Golds from the Burke Mountain Naturalists to come forward. She's here to speak on the Metro Vancouver Draft Colony Farm Regional Park Sustainability Plan.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak to you. I just want to clarify that I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Burke Mountain Naturalists, and we really appreciate this opportunity to summarize why we're so concerned about the sustainability farm plan for Colony Farm. When Colony Farm was declared as a regional park in 1995, local government played a really important role in helping to make that happen, as Councillor Sikora alluded to last week. The original advisory committee contained representatives from Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam city staff, plus local stewardship groups, including myself as a representative of the Naturalists. And we're delighted to see your continued interest in the future of Colony Farm. It's truly a beautiful park with trails for hiking and cycling, significant wildlife habitat for 200 or so species of birds, and it also has a very proud history as a farm, which was once part of Essendale. So it's wildlife habitat, beautiful trails, rich soils. These were the 3 main reasons to protect Colony Farm in 1995, and they remain so today. But we do have major concerns with the farm plan for Colony Farm, which Metro Vancouver presented to you last week. Farming within regional parks is a new and we feel a controversial initiative for Metro Vancouver Parks. They propose to provide opportunities for the public to experience working commercial farms within regional parks and are just completing public consultation on their new parks plan. The plan for Colony Farm would likely be the first such example, and so I just want to go through what some of our main concerns are. First, the farm plan for Colony Farm is going to cost us all a lot of money. Phase 1 would cost about $5 million. Total costs are assumed to be around $30 million. The expectation are that some funds will be raised through grants, but some will come from Metro Vancouver, and certainly planning time and staff time will. But money doesn't grow on trees or in agricultural fields, so we're really worried that such huge expenditures will come from the existing parks budget, and it will divert funds away from much-needed core park services. We feel that's already happening to a certain extent at Colony Farm. For many years, we've been asking for washrooms, renovations of the heritage buildings, which the City of Coquitlam so wisely added to their heritage list. We've been asking for trail repair, replanting of trees along Colony Farm Road, and so on. But tax dollars are scarce, and so we want to be sure that park funds are first spent on meeting basic park needs. We fear this plan will divert funds away from important park services. Regarding the trail closure at Colony Farm, since it was closed instead of being repaired, park visitations have dropped tremendously. They numbered 384,000 in 2005, but dropped to only 255,000 in 2009. No other park, regional park, experienced such a drop in visits, so we think it's really a big mistake not to be repairing that trail. If the farm plan is financed in part from grants, what will happen when that grant money runs out? Because it almost always does at some point. This new plan is actually the 4th farm plan for Colony Farm. The most successful one to date, one that actually resulted in farming, not just planning, was with a non-profit group in Surrey, and that was a very nice group that we enjoyed working with. But their grant money ran out, and when it did, they left. That could easily happen again with this new farm plan, and we worry about what obligations would be left for Metro Vancouver to pick up if the new farm plan depends on grants that also disappear. We also question if commercial agriculture is appropriate in a park setting. Metro Vancouver Parks has suggested that people should be able to experience a working farm and purchase food at a farmer's market at Colony Farm. Well, we've already got several local farmers markets. Do we really want to undermine those markets by putting tax dollars into creating a market at Colony Farm? And is Colony Farm, with limited parking and access, really the right place for a market? And again, your staff report has rightly raised such questions about that. And what about unfair competition with private farmers if Metro Vancouver creates a commercial working farm on parkland at Colony Farm? Is that appropriate? For example, there's farmers in Langley that have created very popular circle farm tours to attract the public and sell their products. Is it really appropriate for Metro Vancouver, supported by tax dollars, to be in competition with these farmers? It's obvious to us that commercial farming could certainly have negative impacts on the other values of Colony Farm, mainly its wildlife habitat and recreation trails. Just as one example, a Yupik berry farm has been proposed for Colony Farm. Now, such a berry farm would attract bears and starlings. Increased bears on the trails at Colony Farm would create conflicts for people using those trails. An increased number of starlings, an aggressive non-native bird, would have negative impacts on the very diverse songbird population at Colony Farm. We've got a long list of such potential negative impacts, but there's not time tonight to tell you about them. We're also worried that this farm plan does not respect the exceptional wildlife values of Colony Farm. For example, we're presently losing 7 acres of grassland habitat to be replaced by fish channels in a field that we thought was dedicated exclusively as wildlife habitat. And now this farm plan is calling for a First Nations ethnobotany demonstration area within that same wildlife field. Now, that's just not appropriate. A First Nations botanical garden? That sounds like a great idea, but it needs to be located within agricultural areas, not in a dedicated wildlife area. And we're finding that the park planners at Metro Vancouver are not respecting the needs of wildlife at Colony Farm. Another proposal in the farm plan calls for land to be turned over to institutions for the training of farmers. And again, we have to ask if this is an appropriate activity in a public park. Now, if some types of farming are deemed to be suitable for public parks, would Colony Farm necessarily be the best park? Colony Farm has a history of being a farm, one that was highly supported by government funds and had free labor from the patients of Riverview, I should point out. But times have changed. Ranch Park's no longer a ranch, and the farming community has moved elsewhere. Farmers need a farming community around them to thrive, and Colony Farm is now remote from such areas. If providing incubator farms is an appropriate activity in regional parks, the best park would probably be Campbell Valley, which lies within a thriving agricultural community. Farmers need other farmers close by to share knowledge and equipment, and they often need their neighbors' help. They also need hardware and feed stores that support farm businesses, not home renovations. Colony Farm is not in the right place. So, what is the best use for the agricultural soils at Colony Farm? We think the solution lies in providing people with a space in the park to grow food, whether it be a cooperative community garden, allotment-type gardens, gardens to grow food for the food bank, therapeutic gardens, gardens designed for seniors. You name it, we think Colony Farm has got the gardening space. And we know there's a long list of people who would like a garden plot at Colony Farm. Colony Farm, in the middle of the Lower Mainland, is ideally located to serve this, the large population of Metro Vancouver residents, and it's close to public transit. With secure space to store tools, people could travel to Colony Farm by bike or public transit to garden. Garden plots would bring more people into the parks and get them involved in the healthy process of growing food. And this can be done without expensive drainage improvements by using raised beds for gardening. We think agricultural productivity in a regional park is best measured by the pairs of hands in the garden plots, not by the pounds of potatoes produced. So that's just our summary of what we think is our vision for gardening at Colony Farm. We look forward to having a really robust public consultation process, and we're very glad to see the recommendation from staff. And I guess we'll look forward to seeing you at the public meetings for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Out of deference to the tremendous work you've done over the years, we let you go way over. But you presented a compelling case for, we're left with many of the same challenges because, of course, this isn't our plan. This is Metro Vancouver's plan. In some ways, we didn't know about its existence until it was finally presented to us. So thank you very much for coming out to present those thoughts to us. Councillor Sikora has some.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Elaine, for coming here tonight. You bring a lot of good knowledge and good advice to the council members. Certainly, you know, I value your information that you give us, because I felt last week when I spoke, when John Carline was here, very poor paper reporting on it, that they were commercializing colony farms. Am I reasonably correct on that?
That's one of the farming activities that has been proposed in the plan, a commercial farm.
Yeah. Now, you know, also Mr. Kalan mentioned about public consultation. I'm very leery about public consultation by Metro Vancouver, because their consultation is not what I call consultation. It's a one-track kind of deal, one-minded kind of deal. Whatever they want, that's what they're going to accomplish. So would our referendum be better if we held our referendum? We said that hold this up until we have a referendum in this city as far as colony farms are concerned, or a public hearings.
I feel very confident with that. With council's influence, we can get a really, robust public consultation process. And I know, Port Coquitlam is also interested in this happening as well. So, I hope, we won't have to go to Metrotown to have a public consultation meeting about colony farm. I hope we can do it here.
Yeah, okay. And also garden plots. When you mentioned garden plots, there's certainly garden plots there where Coquitlam residents have a plot for a garden. But Mr. Carline mentioned about fulfilling their obligation on colony farms. And I was on Metro board then, and certainly there was no obligations by the provincial government. They gave us for $1. I was on that committee, matter of fact, and on the Parks and Recreation chair. But anyways, fulfilling their obligation. So you feel that if they advertise that these plots will be given to Coquitlam residents first, that I'm sure those 65 acres or 75 acres they're talking about would be all taken up. Am I correct? Or?
No, I think there's actually a considerable amount of space at Colony Farm for garden plots.
Yeah.
And would there be obvious advantages if you live in Coquitlam, because then you're nice and close, but they would be open to people from around the region.
And it would be taken up. The land would be taken up, I feel.
I think probably most of the land could be taken up with garden plots. It really depends on the details of how they're set up, and we're not into that level of detail yet for planning, right?
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a little clarification to staff, or perhaps even to Ms. Golds. Is there a good understanding of to what extent the land was encumbered at that point of transfer from the province to Metro with the requirement for maintenance of agriculture? We understand from Mr. Carline last week that there was an encumbrance to some degree that the land be used at least partly for agriculture. Does one of our staff have an answer to that, or Ms. McKay?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Further to Mr. Carline raising that last week, staff are investigating to see if there are any covenants that are registered on that property. We're certainly aware that it is part of the Agricultural Land Reserve, and that in and of itself has some procedures and restrictions related to it. But on the matter of the covenant, we don't have that information yet at this time.
If I could interject, because I sat on that original committee, there was a land use plan developed for Colony Farm, and it was developed in the absence of the knowledge it would become a regional park. When it was announced it would become a regional park, that advisory committee recommended that the land use plan developed become a covenant attached to it becoming a park. And what that plan does is it designates certain fields at Colony Farm for either agricultural use, which I would hope garden plots would fall into in a regional park, wildlife habitat, or so-called integrated use, which was meant to be a combination between wildlife and agriculture.
Yeah, that does make sense. Okay. Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Council's pleasure. 9.7 is on this item. Do we want to move directly to that and deal with it now? I see nods. I don't see any shaking. Therefore, Mr. Clerk, we'll move to 9.7 with Council's consent.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 9.7 has been brought up on the screen before you, and this concerns the draft Colony Farm Regional Park Preliminary Sustainability Plan. The recommendation of the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee is that Council urge Metro Vancouver to undertake a thorough community consultation process to seek Coquitlam public input prior to finalizing the plan.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I very much appreciate Elaine's presentation. I want to note just for the record that I don't want any of us to forget that I think we heard a commitment from Mr. Carline last week that they would proceed with washrooms at Colony Farm, whether or not this plan proceeds. He indicated a timeline that I think said they would do their planning in 12 and build in 13, and I wonder whether they're using the same process that we used at the Hickey Courts, but it seems to me that not that tough a job to get on with. There's already running water down there. I have an amendment to propose. In our staff report, we talk about staff having asked Metro previously about extensive consultation and about reporting back to this council prior to Metro finalizing this plan. And so I had something nice and written out, and I copied it and pasted it somewhere and lost it. However, I think I can recapture it from my mind. So I would add to the recommendation before us.
Councillor, did you want to, we have a couple of the speakers, do you want to let them go ahead and we'll hold the spot for an amendment for you?
No.
No, you're good? Okay, go ahead.
I think I can get this. So what I'd like to say is, and to report back to council, both here and in Port Coquitlam, prior to Metro finalizing this plan. Report back, sorry, the results of the consultation. Here and Port Coquitlam, prior to finalizing the plan. Thank you. I think the reasons are obvious. The one phrase that came to mind as I was thinking about this is, Metro needs to be accountable to the host communities of these parks. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask for your indulgence on the current motion asks for them to seek Coquitlam public input, and since your amendment suggests Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam, we ought to add Port Coquitlam input on the input side. So the motion would read that we get Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam public input and report back to those two councils prior to finalizing the plan. And that motion has been seconded on the amendment. Next, does anyone have any concerns about the amendment? Why don't we just accept that? All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Carried. The motion as amended. Councillor Nicholson, do you have anything further?
Nothing further, thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. This is one of those sort of interesting challenges that we have around how do we do this interface between recognizing that we do have a need to have sustainable food growth, and how do we do that, or food production, and how do we do that, and how do we protect our natural areas. And one of the concerns I have is, and my limited experience of Metro consultation process, is that they don't do as robust consultation as I think is necessary, particularly around something like this. That if we are going to move forward and try to do what I'll call a both and, I want to make sure that they get it right and that they've taken everybody and every angle into consideration. And it might mean that they have to shrink their plan or they have to redo it differently in order to recognize some of the challenges. So if this really is truly going to be a pilot project, they better get it right. And I think they're better off to take their time, spend the energy in making sure that they figure out how to do this right. So I'm not quite sure how to articulate this, and I don't know if this is an amendment or what it is, but I would actually like to see their plan for consultation. And is it appropriate for us to ask Metro that before we provide comment, I'd like to see what the plan is to engage the public, particularly our public, around their thoughts, their concerns, their suggestions. And I want to make sure that that's a robust plan, because really, frankly, having 2 afternoon meetings down in Metrotown doesn't cut it for me. And they might call that, I think they used I'm trying to think of, I don't remember, it's somewhere in the report, meaningful engagement. And I'm not quite sure what they mean by meaningful. And I would like to ask them to do that. And unfortunately, I didn't think about it last time when Mr. Carline was here last week. So if anyone has some suggestions about how we could get that, if it's an appropriate request for us to ask Metro about their specific consultation plan, I'd be certainly willing to hear some bright-eyed idea about how to do that.
Well, I'm going to suggest that I'm actually making some notes here as to how we go back to Metro Vancouver and ask more questions about what they have in mind. There was questions at the previous Parks Committee meeting about how that would unfold, and some of it was in sub-region and some of it was regional. I think their perception is that regional parks ought to be dealt with regionally, and that sort of means Burnaby, which is unfortunate because it does mean that we don't, the region that's most affected by the decisions doesn't, the sub-region that's most affected by the decisions doesn't get included. So we should perhaps then be more specific in the memo. So it suggests that the recommendation could be more specific than what we're talking about.
Can we then ask for a consultation process, a part of the consultation process that is specific to the cities of Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam that provides opportunities for our residents to engage in our home communities in this consultation process?
Seeing pretty much a consensus around council, we'll make certain that the letter outlining this requirement spells out those particular terms.
And that they need to be in the evenings. Thank you.
And there needs to be cookies. Okay.
Fresh fruit.
Fresh fruit, okay.
Thank you.
Made notes. Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yep. Councillor Robinson's correct. What she's saying, consultation with Metro Vancouver is something that, got many ways of going about their consultation. Fact is that, they consulted on an incinerator, but they had made up their mind long before the consultation that the incinerator is the way they're going to go. The rest didn't really matter. And there was hundreds of people turned out against it, but what did they do? They had a vote in the Metro Vancouver for incineration. Okay? Now, what happened also, this thing came aboard to us without anybody from Coquitlam on a parks board for Metro Vancouver. I don't know who they're talking to, but they certainly, pardon?
Mayor's on the park.
On it now, but I'm talking about 2009, May.
This was developed
That's when it raised its ugly head. And matter of fact, just came to us here a few months ago. So, and Mr. Carline didn't really seem to object to having the public hearings in Coquitlam about it or a referendum. He didn't say, he said we want to work with Coquitlam. So, I'd suggest that also, Mayor, I'm not happy with, because as Councillor Robinson said, what is their consultation? We haven't got a blueprint of their consultation. What did they mean by it? There's many, it's like an octopus. It grows all kinds of crazy legs. But anyways, I think I'd feel much better as far as our taxpayers are concerned in this community if A, we could hold a couple public hearings in Coquitlam, or that they hold it up. Can we have a referendum on it? We got an election coming up in November. Can we put it on our ballot in November for a referendum if we wish to? If we made up our mind within the next week or two.
I don't know that we can.
Well, as you know, Councillor Sikora, the date for that has long passed. Mr. Clerk.
Yeah, as we said before, it's possible, but we'd have to change all of the processes. We're so close to the election, it would actually be very difficult and problematic. And it is, from our perspective at this stage, it is a Metro Vancouver consultation process, and it'd be difficult to have it on a Coquitlam ballot at this time.
Mr. Clerk, that's exactly what I'm arguing about, the Metro Vancouver consultation. To me, they don't consult. They tell you it shall be or will be, and that's as far as their consultation is concerned. And I know Mrs. Gold says that she's quite comfortable with their consultation, but I guarantee you, after she gets through with the consultation that they're willing to put forward, she'll be very disappointed. A lot of other people will be very disappointed. So I'm not happy with it. But however, if that's the wishes, it's fine. And I know that Councillor Nicholson made amendments, so I'm going to support it. But I'd like to go a little further than that. But that's the way it shall be.
So it shall be. Okay. Councillor Lynch.
Well, thank you. Well, the difficult decision isn't going to be made tonight. I mean, this recommendation is really to seek thorough community consultation, which is the easy part. I somehow wish that we had a very nice presentation from Elaine Golds here, and when we had Mr. Carline at our committee, which is 2 different meetings and obviously 2 different types of media that are going to be recording it, we were able to ask him a lot of difficult questions, which would have been beneficial to have been able to have that opportunity to do now. Some of the things that we talked to him about is he wants us to go through this consultation process because he wants to go through a draft plan, because he can't go out and solicit any type of funding for it until the plan is in a draft stage. We asked a whole bunch of questions about whether or not the city of Coquitlam was going to be on the hook for any of these dollars. I mean, in the report it states that there's no direct financial cost to the city, but it does talk about that our staff costs are going to be involved. So there is going to be a cost to the city. I too have some concerns about how we're going to do the Metro Vancouver consultation, but we did ask Mr. Carline a whole lot of questions, and he said that he was going to seek advice from us and see what type of consultation we wanted to have. And I think we basically have to hold his feet to the fire on that and make sure that he follows through on those promises, as he did with, he made a few promises at the committee meeting, including the washrooms that Councillor Nicholson has brought up. So I think that it's important that we, of course, do pass this recommendation for the consultation, and we need to get it out there. But we also have to make sure that there's proper opportunity to kind of have both sides of the story at the same venue, and I think that would have been beneficial in hindsight. Obviously, we had such a long meeting that Ms. Golds wasn't able to present. She was there, but she wasn't really going to be given adequate time to be speaking to us at that time because of the length of the meeting and because of the intense questioning we did of Mr. Carline. So I certainly am looking forward to this. I think there are some real positives to be considered for this with some negatives, and we have to figure out exactly what the balance is and what's going to be the best for our community. And the only way we're going to find out a lot more about this, plus the way that the feeling is in the community, is to go through consultation, which is something I think this council is getting more and more committed to doing.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson, again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate Councillor Sikora's skepticism about Metro Vancouver public consultation. It's founded on a great many more years' experience of it than I have had. But I believe Mr. Carline was here last week. We had a long conversation with him. I think he understood our skepticism about his consultation process, and he made some undertakings to improve it, to be responsive to what we had to say. We have before us what remains at this point a reasonably simple resolution to put to Metro Vancouver as to how we'd like them to act, and we also have it considerably fleshed out by the discussion around the table. We have the mayor saying we'll add this to the letter that goes to Metro Vancouver. I think we have to understand that it's our job, the job of this council, to make the Metro Vancouver situation work. And we have to do that by communicating with them, by making it clear what we want, and most importantly, by our representatives at Metro Board being clear as to the position of this council. And the real thrust of what I have to say is sending a letter that says here's the resolution that council passed and here's some of the stuff that came in the conversation around council is great, but we really need our Metro Board reps to speak up at the board and make sure all those representatives know what the feeling is in Coquitlam. And this may be one, I hope it is, where we're partners with Port Coquitlam in speaking up at that board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, most of it's been said, but some of my concerns after listening to the long conversation that we had last week were costs to the city, as Councillor Lynch has mentioned. Everything's silent right now, so I don't know what the costs to us are going to be. And I also don't know what the transportation is going to be. You know, how are they going to get more buses out here? How are they going to transport people? What's that going to do to the transportation we have now? We've already been told by Ipsos Reid that's a big concern in our community, and it would be great to have people coming from all over the region, but if we're not going to get increased transportation with something like this, I think we have to look at it. There's going to be a fish, what do we call it, fish channels and things like that, along with First Nations. Who is going to look after that? Or is it going to be park staff? Who is going to maintain or do whatever you have to do to a fish channel? Never having owned one, I have no idea. but there's got to be something you'd have to do. Who is actually going to take over ownership of looking after it and making sure that it's working in the way it's supposed to be? And again,
actually, on that, my understanding is that the TI Corp, which is funding the development of at least some of the fish channels, is actually funding as well the operation for a given number of years, after which the operation reverts to the Metro Vancouver. Metro Vancouver looks after it, but it is funded out of TI. And I see Elaine nodding on that.
Right away, it might be, but you know,
in other words, long term, it's
long term. What are we going to do? Are we going to
taxpayers.
have it for 5 years and then it just all falls apart? Then what have we got? Just a special bowl lunch soups, fish lunch for the coyotes. Then, of course, my big concern is Riverview Lands across the street. We're looking for a wellness center, and Colony Farm used to be part of that, and there used to be a place there where there could be critters, and I asked if there were going to be. It wasn't in Phase 1 plan, but it's definitely obviously in Phase 2. So all of these things are interesting questions, and I think we have to put them all on the table and have a plan that's going to work for 20 years or 30 years, not something that's going to be funded for 5, and then who the heck knows what happens after that. Those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was pleased to have the opportunity to speak with Dr. Golds at the Tree Fest at Riverview Hospital yesterday, as well as on numerous other occasions on this subject, because it's true, while this was planned 2 years ago and essentially delivered to the city at that point, to some degree our surprise, at the time we were the largest city in the region, and pretty much the only city with significant regional parks that wasn't on the Regional Parks Committee. Hadn't been represented traditionally, and we were able to get represented on that committee, although we put forward Councillor McDonnell's name, and instead I got appointed. I haven't yet served a full term on that committee, but it is good that we are there. Nonetheless, this plan hasn't been drafted with the current committee. It was drafted with the previous committee, and it does create challenges. The committees, though, the three committees had there was a joint committee meeting last week. The Agriculture Committee, the Environment and Energy Committee, and the Parks Committee. And it really did reflect some of the competition for this park, because the Agriculture Committee felt, perhaps its representatives felt, that this is the perfect place for agricultural demonstration and such. Councillor Steves from Richmond made a compelling argument, a very strongly felt argument, passionate argument for the historic agricultural values of the land. So it's at the same time as the land has been traditionally, in my experience as someone who's lived not far from that park for his whole life, it's been a natural space, and the loss of the Paddocks Trail, for example, is something we feel now as we try to ride our bikes through the park. So this park, I think Coquitlam residents think it's ours. Coquitlam residents think it's ours, and yet it is funded by the region, and therefore the region's taxpayers get to decide what happens to it in large measure, because they own it, and that's the challenge. We don't get a veto, we don't get to run a referendum, but we got commitment from Mr. Carline that there would be a good consultation process. I take that at face value, and we will pursue that now. Our staff report is robust in that requirement, that there be a good process, and I fully intend to hold their feet to the fire, as Councillor Lynch and Councillor Nicholson suggested we ought to, because this is the next thing that we have to consult. We have to get the public, though, engaged, and getting the public engaged will be the next challenge, and I leave that partly in the hands of Dr. Golds. No other speakers. The motion as amended. Does anyone need it read back? I don't think so. We're all good. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much again for your presentation.
Item 8 is the minutes of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting of Monday, September 12th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Mayor Stewart.
Oh, Councillor Asmundson has something he'd like to say. Councillor
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
As this application is close proximity to my home, I'm going to excuse myself of a perceived potential conflict. Thank you.
We will try to remember to bring you back.
No. With all due respect, Mayor, Council, he excused himself for no reason at all. There's a, I mean, you can't have a council member that just, at his whim, decides to excuse himself from a debate that doesn't really affect him, his property, or anything else. He can't stand to gain by this whatsoever. And I really detest this kind of politics being played in these council chambers. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Is that a point of order or
no, just a comment. The fact is that you should have made that comment because really, frankly, Mayor, there's no reason why this council member has excused himself from this item. None whatsoever. And you can get a legal opinion, you can do anything you want. And the fact is, that's a fact. Unless he can gain something financially by it or whatever it is, then there's a problem. But I don't see any problems in here. But he chooses to excuse himself from anything that's in his area. And I think it's terrible. And I think, Mayor, you need to control that. You really do. Thank you very much.
Councillor Score, out of deference to your years on council, I will leave it at that. I actually don't have the right to order him to stay in the room. We'll leave it at that. Mr. Clerk, thank you. Mr. Nicholson. Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Nicholson. Please, go ahead.
Well, I've got it all right. I would just respectfully suggest that none of us can really know what plans any other councillor might have, and that's why it's up to each of us to declare ourselves when we believe we're in conflict. And it's a matter of opinion that can't be held by anyone but the person affected. Some of us might have opinions otherwise, but we don't know all the facts. Thank you.
Well, you've stated it correctly. This is up to each council member to declare a conflict or a potential for the perception of conflict. Councillor Asmundson has repeatedly declared the potential for a perception of conflict that someone might perceive he has something to gain. And in fact, at one point in his political career, I remember an issue being raised about that one question that he was close to something, and therefore it may well be that proximity created a conflict. He has chosen an abundance of caution. I can't find fault in it because the Act doesn't allow me to find fault, but also because I don't think it's necessarily wrong. So but even if I thought it was wrong, there's nothing that I would be able to do about it because the Act says so. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 8.3 is a preliminary zoning bylaw amendment report to facilitate the development of street-oriented village homes and small village single-family homes on Soball Street, Gislason, and this is Bylaw 4247. The recommendations the Council give first reading to see Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4247 and refer Bylaw 4247 to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor McDonnell. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I will go gather Councillor Asmundson, or Mr. McIntyre will do so.
There we go. Welcome back, Councillor Asmundson. Mr. Clerk.
Item 8.4 is a preliminary zoning bylaw number 4252 to rezone 1188 Pinetree Way to accommodate a future mixed-use high-density development. The recommendation is that Council give first reading to City Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4252 and refer this bylaw to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Raymer, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8.5 is a preliminary OCP amendment and rezoning report to redesignate, which is Bylaw 4248, and rezone, which is Bylaw 4249, industrial property 1100 Woolridge Street to accommodate a future service commercial use. The recommendations of Council give first reading to Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 4248, first reading to Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4249, and refer both of these bylaws to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Raymer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8.6 is a report for 626 and 630 Como Lake Avenue in order to accommodate a 4-story apartment building. This is Bylaw 4253. The recommendation is that Council give first reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4253 and refer this bylaw to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8.7 is a report to discharge the land use contract. This is Bylaw 4256 and rezone Bylaw 4257, 2590 Austin Avenue for RT2 Townhouse Residential. The recommendation is give first reading to City of Coquitlam Land Use Contract Discharge Bylaw 4256, first reading to Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4257, and refer both of these bylaws to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Reid.
And please note that there was direction to staff to have an inspection done by the public hearing. So,
Mr. Clerk.
Absolutely, and thank you to Councillor Reid for bringing that up. As the minutes of the Land Use Committee notes, there was a direction to staff, and as the minutes also note, this may mean that this item doesn't appear on the next public hearing. This item will appear on the public hearing once that request has been satisfied.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 is a zoning text amendment bylaw report to amend the C6 Casino Commercial Zone in order to accommodate the addition of a hotel and conference facilities at the Boulevard Casino located at 2080 United Boulevard. This is Bylaw 4259. The recommendations give first reading to zoning text amendment Bylaw 4259 and refer Bylaw 4259 to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Sikora. Councillor Nicholson.
And somewhat in the same vein as Councillor Reid, I'll just remind people that there were a number of questions raised at the committee that I would expect responses to and prior to the public hearing or at the time of the public hearing. And I'm sure staff will be taking those up with the proponent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Seeing none others, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8.9 is a OCP amendment to redesignate and rezone the residential properties listed before you on Highland Drive, on Coast Meridian Road, and Dayton Street in order to accommodate a strata duplex development. These are bylaws 4250 and 4251. The recommendation from the Land Use Committee is that Council give first reading to Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 4250, first reading to Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4251, and refer both these bylaws to public hearing.
Recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you very much. And once again, I had a bunch of questions about this application at committee for the answers coming before public hearing. And I guess, when I looked at this application, we talk about duplexes, but these aren't really what you would think of regular duplex or some of the duplexes already been built in the Northeast. These are more of a townhouse look. The separation between them is, I think, 1.4 meters. The regular townhouse development would be 4.5 meters. They're a lot narrower in width. So it's a different type of townhouse. It's actually a townhouse, not so much a duplex looking on that type of lot. So I have some concerns about that, but I'll move this on to public hearing and listen to what the public has to say about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. At the committee, I asked about community garden, given that it would have these rolling lawns, and received some concerned letters from some citizens about that. So I actually followed up with Drake Stevens, our Bearware fellow, who actually even suggested that this would be an appropriate place for how to do community gardens or how to do gardening with a bear-deer interface. And so I thought that was very, very interesting. So I really do hope the proponent sees an opportunity to do that. Well, onions and carrots. No berries. Thank you.
Forage. Okay, seeing no other speakers. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8.10 is a proposed lane cancellation application adjacent to 955 Austin Avenue. This is Bylaw 4246. Recommendations is that Council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4246 and direct that this bylaw be advertised in accordance with the Community Charter.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Nicholson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8.11 is consideration of fourth and final reading for zoning amendment bylaw 4212 and authorization for the issuance of a DVP, and this pertains to 2810 Glen Drive. The recommendation, and perhaps for the Information Council, I'd like to divide the recommendation just because the DVP will require a separate process. So perhaps first that we will give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4212.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Second part of the recommendation is to approve the signing and sealing of the development variance permit and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it. I'd like to invite the Mayor to call for speakers.
As is consistent, we normally produce a mini public hearing. Are there any speakers to this item? Are there any speakers to this item? Third and final time, are there any speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll declare this item complete. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would now invite members of Council to move and second this recommendation if they support it.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. No discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 812 is the development permit authorization for the Thomas House. It's a 72-unit apartment building in 1150 Kensal Place. The recommendation is that Council approve the signing and sealing of this DP and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Lynch. Speakers, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 813 is an application for temporary use permits for the cold wet weather mat program and at three different addresses: 2601 Spurway Avenue, 1160 Lansdowne Drive, and 1636 Regan Avenue. The recommendation is that Council authorize the issuance of these permits for the Coquitlam Alliance Church and the Calvary Baptist Church for a minimum of a period of 3 years, and a temporary use permit for the Eagle Ridge Bible Fellowship for a minimum period of 1 year in order to continue operating the cold wet weather mat program.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Lynch. This has become a labour of love for the committee, and committee chair, Councillor Reid.
I just wanted to thank the churches again for coming up to the fore and providing this service again for another cold winter. Hopefully maybe we'll have a nice toasty winter because we didn't get much of a summer. So thank you to all the churches for this. And please note that we did move forward as promised on 3030 Gordon, and we're awaiting information on when we can proceed further with that. But in the meantime, you're doing a great service for your community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No other speakers. The motion is the MAT program. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9 is the minutes of the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee meeting of Monday, September 12th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
First item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the tennis facility study, and the recommendation of the committee is that Council direct staff to proceed with the feasibility study, options to include indoor-outdoor tennis facilities that could provide tournament-level capability, and an analysis of potential sites for future consideration, and to approve a project budget of $10,000 from the Capital Fund to complete the feasibility study, subject to matching funds from Tennis Canada.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Reamer. Committee Chair, Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. We have a very strong advocacy group in the city involving tennis. And of course, tennis is one of the fastest growing sports and cuts across gender lines and age groups, male and female, and kids and adults playing it all at the same level. The important thing to note, and a little, I guess, something for other groups to see, the tennis group here is willing to step up to the table financially, and that's a real big deal when it comes to working with the city with facilities and getting your sport and your facilities front and center in Coquitlam. And I'm very pleased to see this moving along, and I'm sure that Council agrees with me on that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you, and I agree with what Councillor McDonnell has just said. And further to that, I just wanted to remind staff at our council committee meeting the suggestion to include the Northeast Tennis Society in the public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Again, at the meeting that we had, the committee meeting, I did mention that I would specifically like to see not just the presidents and treasurers and that of the various tennis clubs, but everybody. I'd like to see a really inclusive feasibility study done, because I think if we're going to do it, let's do it right and do it once. Thank you.
Sentiments exactly. Seeing no other speakers, all those in favor, all those opposed, we'll have a feasibility study. Motion carries unanimously.
Item 9.3 concerns the Rick Hansen 25th Anniversary Relay. This is an update report. The recommendation of the committee is that Council approve participation of the City in the Rick Hansen 25th Anniversary Relay as outlined in the report of the General Manager.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Asmussen. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I really support this. I think it's a great idea. I've had several citizens express their support for it as well. I'm just wondering when the routes will be determined by the Foundation.
Through to the Chair, the route confirmation for BC will be made by the end of October, and that's why we need this approval for them to commit.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weidert. No other questions? The motion is the Rick Hansen Tour. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9.7 has been disposed of earlier, so I'll move on to item 10. Item 10 is the minutes of the Engineering, Utilities and Environment Standing Committee meeting, and these are its minutes of September 12th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10.2 concerns the Northeast Sector Transfer Station service continuity. Three-part recommendation of the committee is that Council request Metro Vancouver to initiate a continuity plan in partnership with the Northeast Sector municipalities and any other affected municipality wishing to participate, ensure that the Northeast Sector waste processing service is uninterrupted during the implementation of the regional waste plan, and that Metro be advised of Coquitlam support for a temporary facility within Coquitlam on an appropriately zoned land on the understanding that such a temporary facility could be converted to an eco-centre.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Asmussen. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. This transfer station, you know, when say Waste Act moves out, we will not have a transfer station for residents in our community where they can drop off stuff like they used to, and who knows where they'll have to go. But however, we did have a piece of land here in Coquitlam that we could have bought and certainly had that transfer station in place. But however, when I was in hospital, there was a report put forward that that land was totally contaminated, which was not true. Certainly, the gentleman said that he'd clear up that contamination if there was any, and there was maybe $10,000 worth of contamination in there. That's all. And rightfully, the fact is now we're scrambling, and we're also going to lose about $700,000 a year when Waste Act moves out. So, you know, there'll be another bang on the taxpayers for more money. And we could have killed two birds with one stone. I was picked as a chairman to see how we'd look after the garbage for the Tri-City or for Coquitlam. Mr. Zuzak and myself went all the way to Cache Creek and all over the place and to different transfer stations and see what's there in the lower mainland. And lo and behold, when I was in hospital, this resolution was brought forward, and the council members voted against it.
Councillor Sikora, no member of council will be able to counter what you're saying, because what you're saying, of course, was in camera.
It's not in camera. I'm sorry. You know what, Mayor? Look, I've mentioned a piece of land. Unless I mention a specific piece of land and the price and a few other things, then I'm in conflict. So please, Mayor, do your job. Do your job as a mayor. I'm really disgusted with the way you carry on as a mayor. You seem to nick and pick at me. You want to pick at me? Go ahead. Every meeting that we start in the evening, you should pick at me first. Take about 5 or 10 minutes and pick at me first, and then we can carry on. But you know what? I did not mention the land. I didn't mention the amount of money or anything else. So there's nothing in camera about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm afraid I was considerably distracted for a moment there. I need to recapture my thoughts. We are once again talking about a request to Metro Vancouver, as we did a few minutes ago, and matters dealing with Metro Vancouver will probably be the most time-consuming items on our agenda tonight. We have a request to Metro about continuity for the transfer station, ensuring our service is uninterrupted, and our support for a temporary facility. And we have to do that. And it's important that Metro hear what we have to say. This issue was raised a few months ago through the Northeast Sector Environmental Steering Committee with our neighboring municipalities. And I think in addition to passing this recommendation, it's important that we, at both the staff and political levels, work with our neighbor municipalities. It's a problem for all of us in the Northeast. We need to present a united front to Metro Vancouver. And again, it's an issue that our representatives to Metro Vancouver need to be front and center on. Make sure their colleagues on the Metro board understand the seriousness of this situation and the costs, not just to our municipality, but to the other municipalities served, and to the considerable increase in greenhouse gases that'll result from the need to truck across the bridge or a considerably greater distance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we've been dealing with this for a while now and getting...
One moment, please, Councillor Asmundson. We've lost your microphone. We'll just get it right back. There you go.
Okay. Thank you very much. We've been dealing with this for a while now about the transfer station and the impact of what could happen on it. We had Mr. Carline at our meeting explaining the issues about this and working together. Now they think their plan for their new waste to energy will move quickly, but at the same time they advised us about purchasing any land or developing or putting any transfer station is not a proper thing to do at this time, because they do not know at this time what type of transfer station they'll require and where it should be located. If it's waste to energy in the region, it may be here. If it's at the Covanta Gold River site, it may be somewhere else. So they said to us, please, we'll work with you, we'll deal with this issue, but that's one issue we don't know, and we don't want to commit to anything until we can find out where we're going with that part of it before we commit to a transfer station. So I think, once again, I like this report. This is a good report. We're telling them we need an answer quickly. At the same time, we have to understand the issues that they're also dealing with in making sure that the right location is chosen first for what type of transfer station we're going to be needing in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly the discussions we've had at Metro. The challenge is, obviously, if we're shipping by barge, it's going to be a waterfront transfer station. If they're building an incinerator, perhaps at Burnaby next to the existing incinerator, then they're not going to build a transfer station in Coquitlam to transfer the garbage into a different truck to drive it to Burnaby. So we, obviously setting up a transfer station in Coquitlam at this point, before that decision is made, is one that it would be foolhardy. So I think we need to obviously allow Metro Vancouver to go through its process, urge it to do it quickly, urge it to do its due diligence and make a decision that benefits the region, and then act on it with the most appropriate transfer station, and allow Coquitlam to be as cooperative as we can. Seeing no other speakers, the motion is staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10.3 concerns a strategic approach to parking policy for city centre and rapid transit station areas. Recommendations that Council direct staff to report back in 2012 with specific recommendations that advance their strategic approach to a comprehensive, updated parking policy for the city centre and rapid transit station areas.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10.4 concerns the Partridge, Mantle, and Falakwa Creek drainage assessment. The recommendation is that Council direct staff to forward this report to the province, BC Hydro, FortisBC, and aggregate miners operating in the watersheds, and to request the province as property owner to immediately address the drainage concerns in the watersheds by developing and implementing necessary improvements on their property.
Moved by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor Robinson. I see Councillor Lynch.
Yes, thank you. And I've had a discussion with the Chair of Engineering, Utilities and Environment on this. When this came forward to the committee, some of the concerns were raised that this was being addressed at our committee prior to it going, this issue going to the Coquitlam River Aggregate Committee meeting, and there was a request by Councillor Robinson as to what was the discussion that committee. That committee immediately followed the Engineering Committee, And at that time, I was talking with the aggregate owners, and they expressed some concerns because it can to impact their property. They asked if it would be possible to have this directed back to the engineering committee, and in consultation with the chair, I've asked if it would be possible if I could move a motion to refer it back to the committee so that it can be further discussed at that time, and to give the aggregate miners the opportunity to make some presentations to our committee if they so desire, and to have this discussed more fully at that time.
Okay, moved by the chair of Coquitlam River Ag Committee, Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Reamer, to refer back to CRAC.
No, to the engineering.
To engineering. Back to engineering. Okay, the clarification, is it to both committees or the engineering only? So the motion has been clarified as to be just to engineering, and perhaps engineering may refer it back to CRAC if that's an issue.
Okay.
Okay.
Because
so the
one
motion
issue, just for clarification.
The motion is to refer it back to engineering, the chair of engineering. Councillor Asmus.
Thank you very much. Just the clarification was on the CRAC and having them some more input in it, because I don't think the next meeting's for CRACs until February. We'll have a couple meetings a year, so if we're going to move this back, are you going to move up another meeting or just having a consultation meeting with staff with them rather than through the committee?
Okay, and in the interest of clarification, the rest of us say just say no to CRAC. CRAC is an acronym for the Coquitlam River Aggregate Committee. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. No, the intention was not to send it back to the Coquitlam River Aggregate Committee. It was always to go to engineering. There'll be a substantial amount of minutes from that meeting because there was a lot of discussion on that. And I've talked to the clerk's office, and those minutes from the Aggregate Committee will be available to the engineering. So all the discussion that we had there will be available. And we couldn't get another meeting anyway. There's just so many people that are on that committee that are such have busy schedules, the Ministry of Environment, BC Hydro, DFO, et cetera. So the intention is to have this just returned to the engineering committee so that the aggregate owners have the opportunity to express the concerns of how the actions that we're going to take will impact on their property. I think there was a bit of a confusion that the property was all just going to be provincial property, but of course provincial property is being used by the aggregate owners, so that's why the discussion needs to have further review.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion is referral. All in favor? Opposed? That carried unanimously. Mr. Clerk.
Item 11 concerns the UBCM wildfire fuel management prescription funding application, and the recommendation is that Council direct staff to submit an application to UBCM for the development of this program for Ridge Park.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. No discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, that's the last formal item on the agenda.
Thank you very much. I do want to take the opportunity to acknowledge that on the weekend we had Coquitlam's second Terry Fox run, and I want to perhaps even hand the microphone, or I see she's next on the microphone list. I want to acknowledge one of the people who did some of the organization. Certainly Marta Jackson did a great job, but one of those that participated greatly is our own Councillor Selena Robinson, who also chaired the event.
MC'd it.
MC'd the event. My apologies. MC'd the event. I did almost nothing. I rode my bike in the event. That was it. So, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. This isn't actually about the Terry Fox run. I have a notice of motion.
Okay.
Whereas there have been at least 2 documented instances of bow hunting of bears in Coquitlam this past summer, resulting in at least 1 bear being seriously injured, which in turn resulted in the bear leaving private property and wandering into a city park and other public areas. And whereas bow hunting of animals not only causes animals to suffer, but creates a risk to human safety from an injured animal shot with a bow and arrow. And whereas the British Columbian cities of Chilliwack, Saanich, and Langford regulate hunting by bow and arrow, and the resort municipality of Whistler is undertaking the adoption of a bow hunting prohibition in order to protect citizens from risk of injury from an injured animal, be it therefore resolved that the City of Coquitlam develops an appropriate prohibition of bow hunting. Well, it's been moved. I'm moving it, and Councillor Reid has seconded it.
Okay, and that will appear on the agenda of the next council meeting. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get an appropriate staff report that lays out, or perhaps even examples of the other municipalities' bylaws, because I'd like to know if there are any loopholes that we or any things that we have to deal with in adopting such a decision, and I think it's a good idea. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, I got two items, Mayor. One of them, last week I brought it up, or 2 weeks ago, you mentioned that I could not bring it up then, so I'm bringing it up now. As the mayors, they're meeting on the gas taxes for transit, for Evergreen Line. Yep. Am I correct? So when is it going to come to council, or this council will never have to vote on it, whether to accept it or not? And where the other funding will come from?
Well, the other funding will have to be determined through negotiations with the minister. That has been determined through an agreement that we've come to, a memorandum of understanding with Minister Bond back then, and now Minister Lekstrom. That has been well reported in the local newspapers, across the regional newspapers, and the regional media. So that challenge is probably sometime next year.
Yeah, so will this council have a right to vote on what we accept and what we don't accept, or is it just the mayors that'll be able to make that decision?
Well, actually, I would prefer that we get back to the point where the governance of TransLink is the regional governments, because it isn't right now. It's the governance of TransLink is actually in the hands of a board. The Mayor's Council only, by the governance structure that was established by the provincial government, the Mayor's Council only gets to vote on a supplement.
Okay, thank you. The second item, as you know, if you drive through Coquitlam, there's the hydro lines, and they certainly going through Coquitlam, and behold, on 5 of them, there's the BC, or I guess Rogers and Bell and a few other people have put out their towers on top of ours to transmit for cell phones, to get the cell phones a little clearer. Without, I understand, no permits taken out from the city. Certainly no dialogue with the city, and many, many other things. And the people that live around there have really, really concerns. I noticed that, matter of fact, around the two of the areas, there's houses that are going up for sale. And it really, really concerns me. So I'm going to make a motion that we bring the hydro people in and ask them why they would allow anybody else but hydro to put things on their towers, such as cell phone transmitters.
Second. Thank you. Okay, that's been moved and seconded. That will appear on next council's agenda as a motion that's received notice today. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. On a lighter and more perhaps interesting note, I was attending some functions on the weekend, and I was over at Douglas College, where I'm an alumni, and I was talking to one of the coaches of the soccer program there, and they were asking me if I was aware that the Collegiate Soccer National Championship was going to be held over in Town Centre on Cunnings Field, and I discussed that with Councillor McDonnell, the chair, and he was aware of it, but I wanted to also share that because the coach was very enthusiastic about it. He wanted to ensure that all of council knew it was coming, and he was looking forward to us supporting it in any way we can.
Canadian National Championship.
There you go. Canadian National Championship. Collegiate.
That's in 2 months, or sorry?
No, and a year from now.
A year from now. Okay, 14 months from now, the Canadian National Championships. Thank you for bringing that up. I see no other speakers. I want to acknowledge all the volunteers that did put together a great Terry Fox run. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and acknowledge that tonight was a unanimous meeting. It didn't sound like it, but it was unanimous. Motion to, and it's National Pirate Day. Sorry, corrected by Councillor McDonnell today. It's International Pirate Day. What kind of pirate would just be national after all? It would be an international pirate. So go ahead and say something, Councillor. Speak like a pirate day. Arr. Motion to adjourn? Aye. Aye. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? And that's unanimous as well. Consistent with our procedure, for at least one more meeting, we'll have a question period on the subjects on this evening's agenda. The questions are a maximum of 2 minutes. The council has adopted rules such as there are no preambles, it's not for public comments, it's simply for questions of clarification on tonight's agenda. Please step forward if you have a question. I think I know what this one's about.
Hello, my name is Terry Evans. I'm the chair of the Coquitlam Farmers Market Society, and I live at 1428 Parkway Boulevard in Coquitlam. I wanted to ask a couple questions that related to Metro Vancouver Draft Colony Farm Regional Park Sustainability Plan, which, by the way, we support despite its shortcomings, and we see it as enhancing rather than undermining much of the work that we've been doing in trying to realize a robust food system. My first question had to do with the public consultation process, and might the city ask Metro to invite other experts to attend such meetings, ones that specialize in agricultural and ecological mitigation, ones that speak to innovation in small-scale farming, and other members that might provide some expertise to people that have questions?
We could ask Metro to do that. It would probably be better that you ask Metro to do that, and I suspect now that at least one member of the Parks Committee will be asking for that.
Great. The second issue that was raised by the Draft Colony Regional Park Sustainability Plan has to do with community gardens, and I'm wondering if the city has conducted any inventory of public lands across the city that could be used for community garden expansion, so any future gardens aren't so heavily concentrated in a space that I, from this side of Coquitlam, find very inaccessible, and that they might be embedded in all of our neighborhoods as part of our neighborhood plans.
Okay. Very good question. I've actually asked a similar question to Ms. McKay on a couple of occasions, and I don't know that she has an answer, but she's aware of the question. Ms. McKay.
And my answer is no, we've not yet done that inventory.
There we go. It's on the plan, though. Thank you. Are there any other questions on tonight's agenda? Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you all for coming.